The air in the bus station was thick and soupy, a humid cocktail of diesel fumes, stale popcorn, and the faint, sweet decay of spilled soda. It was a smell that clung to the back of the throat, a taste of transience and goodbyes. I sat on a hard, molded plastic seat, its blue surface scratched with the ghosts of 1,000 previous occupants, and clutched the one-way ticket in my hand. The paper felt flimsy, a fragile passport to a future I couldn't yet imagine. The ticket said my destination was a city 800 miles away, but it felt more like an expulsion from my own life. The loudspeaker overhead crackled, a burst of static that made me jump, before a bored, tinny voice announced a delay for my bus. Another 45 minutes. 45 more minutes to sit in this limbo, to feel the weight of the phone in my pocket, a cold, silent brick that held the evidence of my exile. It had all happened just 12 hours earlier, a storm that had been building for years but finally broke with a violence that shattered our family dinner into a million sharp, irreparable pieces. I could still smell it, that last meal. The rich, savory scent of my mother's pot roast, slow-cooked with carrots and onions until the meat fell apart at the touch of a fork. The warm, yeasty perfume of fresh-baked rolls. The sharp, clean tang of the iced tea with a sprig of mint from the garden. The dining room had been bathed in the soft, golden glow of the overhead chandelier, its cut-glass prisms casting tiny, dancing rainbows on the polished mahogany table. We were all there, the whole Santos family, or what was left of it. My father, Antonio, at the head of the table, his presence a solid, immovable mountain, his hands, calloused from a lifetime of building other people's dreams, resting heavily beside his plate. My mother, Isabella, a flutter of nervous energy, her smile not quite reaching her worried eyes. My older brother, Marco, already mirroring our father's stern posture, his jaw set. And then there was me, Sophia, the youngest, the dreamer, the one who never quite fit the mold. The argument hadn't started over the roast. It had started over a letter, a simple, cream-colored envelope that had arrived that afternoon. An acceptance letter. A full scholarship to the Parsons School of Design in New York. It was everything I had worked for in secret for 3 years, a dream I had nurtured in the quiet of my room, sketching by the light of a small desk lamp, the only sound the soft scratch of charcoal on paper. I had finally gathered the courage to tell them. New York? My father's voice was low, a rumble of distant thunder. He put his fork down, the clink of silver on china unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. You want to go live in that concrete jungle? To do what? Draw pictures. It's not just drawing pictures, Papa. It's design. It's a real career. It's what I love. My own voice sounded thin, reedy, to my ears. Love. Marco snorted, not looking up from his plate. Love doesn't pay the bills, Sophia. You have a responsibility here. The family business. Santos and Sons. It's in the name. It's your legacy. It's your legacy, Marco, I shot back, the heat rising in my cheeks. Not mine. I can't spend my life standing behind a counter, selling hardware to contractors. I'll suffocate. My mother reached out, her hand fluttering to rest on my father's arm. Antonio, calm down. Let's just talk about this. There is nothing to talk about, my father said, his voice final, absolute. He looked at me, and his eyes, usually warm with a deep brown light, were hard and cold. This family has given you everything. A roof over your head, food on this table, and education. We have worked, sacrificed, so that you could have a future. A secure future. Here. With us. And you want to throw it all away for some foolish fantasy? It's not a fantasy. I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the wooden floor. The sound was a scream in the quiet room. It's my life. Why can't you see that? Why does my life have to be only what you decide for me? The words that followed were a blur, a torrent of accusations and ultimatums. I was called ungrateful. Disloyal. A traitor to the family name. Marco accused me of thinking I was better than them. My father's face grew darker and darker, a storm cloud ready to burst. And then came the final, devastating blow. If you walk out that door, Sophia, my father said, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet whisper that was more frightening than any shout, you do not walk back in. You choose this whim, and you are no longer a daughter of this house. You are no longer my daughter. You are forbidden from coming back. Do you understand me? You will be dead to us. The words hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen from the room. The smell of the pot roast now seemed cloying, nauseating. The warm light felt like a lie. I looked at my mother, pleading with my eyes for her to say something, to defend me, to stop this. But she just looked down at her lap, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, a traitor through her silence. So I left. I ran up to my room, my vision blurred with tears, the familiar creak of the third step from the top a painful echo of 1,000 childhood runs. I threw a few clothes, my sketchbooks, my portfolio into a duffel bag. The last thing I grabbed was a small, framed photograph of me and my grandmother, Vovo Alara, taken in her sun-drenched garden when I was 7. She was the only one who had ever understood my need to create. She had passed away 5 years ago, and in that moment, her absence felt like a physical hole in the world. I walked back down the stairs, my bag feeling impossibly heavy. No one tried to stop me. My father stood rigid in the doorway of the dining room, a statue of disapproval. Marco was behind him, arms crossed. My mother was nowhere to be seen. I opened the front door, the cool night air a shock against my hot skin, and I stepped out into the darkness, the solid, familiar oak door closing behind me with a soft, final click that echoed in my soul like a gunshot. And now I was here, in the Greyhound station, waiting for my escape pod to arrive. The fluorescent lights above hummed a monotonous, depressing tune, bleaching all the color from the world. A janitor pushed a wide broom across the stained linoleum floor nearby, the bristles making a soft, swishing sound. I pulled out my phone again, my thumb hovering over the screen. Nothing. No calls. No texts. The silence from my family was a confirmation. They had meant it. I was in exile. I was about to put the phone away when it vibrated in my hand. A single, sharp buzz. My heart leaped into my throat, a frantic, hopeful bird. Was it my mother? Had she changed her mind? I looked at the screen. It wasn't a number I recognized. The area code was local. Frowning, I opened the message. The words on the screen made no sense. They were in Portuguese, our family's native tongue, a language I hadn't heard spoken in the station's generic English. Asterisco, querida Sofia, o jardim da sua avó está cheio de segredos. A chave que ela escondeu para você está sob a terra, aos pés da rosa que não desabrocha. Ela sempre acreditou em você. Não desista da sua família. Eles ainda precisam de você. A verdade enterrada comigo vai libertar todos. Asterisk. I read it once. Then again, my breath catching in my chest. Asterisk, dear Sophia, your grandmother's garden is full of secrets. The key she hid for you is under the earth, at the feet of the rose that does not bloom. She always believed in you. Do not give up on your family. They still need you. The truth buried with me will free everyone. Asterisk. My hands began to tremble so violently I almost dropped the phone. Vovó Alara. The message was about her. But who was it from? It was signed, but the name was just an initial. L. I didn't know any L. I stared at the words, the truth buried with me. Buried with her? Was this some kind of cruel joke? A prank? But it felt too specific, too intimate. The rose that does not bloom. There was one, a single, stubborn white rose bush in the far corner of Vovo's garden that had never, in all the years I could remember, produced a single flower. My grandmother would just smile mysteriously and say it was waiting for the right time. The bus station's loudspeaker crackled again. Now boarding, Greyhound 213 to Knoxville, with connecting service to New York. Final boarding call. The voice was a siren's call to my planned future. The ticket in my hand was my freedom. But this message, this was a thread, a fragile, mysterious thread pulling me back into the past, back toward the home that had just cast me out. I looked at the bus idling at the platform, its engine rumbling, a beast of burden ready to carry me away. Then I looked down at the phone, at the glowing screen that held a message from a ghost. I stood up. My legs felt weak, like they were made of water. I slung my duffel bag over my shoulder, its weight suddenly feeling different. It was no longer the weight of escape, but the weight of a choice. With a deep, shuddering breath that tasted of diesel and doubt, I turned my back on the bus, walked out of the station, and stepped back into the night, heading for the only place I had ever called home, a place I was now forbidden from entering. Continua a história. The walk back was a journey through a ghost town of my own memories. Every familiar landmark, the big oak tree on the corner where I'd scraped my knee learning to ride a bike, the flickering neon sign of Joe's Pizzeria, the quiet, darkened windows of the public library, felt like a taunt. The air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass from someone's lawn and the distant, earthy smell of the river. Crickets chirped their relentless chorus, a sound so normal it felt abnormal. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, a chaotic rhythm of fear, confusion, and a tiny, stubborn flicker of hope ignited by that impossible message. I couldn't go to the front door. My father's words, "You are forbidden from coming back," were a wall as solid as brick and mortar. So I went to the one place that had always been my sanctuary, the one part of the property that felt solely mine and Vovo Alara's, the garden. Our house was on a large, corner lot, and the garden was in the back, separated from the neighbor's yard by a thick, overgrown hedge of lilac and forsythia. There was a loose slat in the wooden fence at the very back, behind the old tool shed, a secret entrance Vovo and I had used for years when we wanted to escape into our green world without going through the house. The neighborhood was asleep, the house is dark except for the occasional blue glow of a television behind a window. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows that seemed to reach for me as I crept along the sidewalk. My sneakers made soft, nearly silent scuffs on the pavement. Turning the final corner, I saw my house. It looked the same as it always had, a two-story colonial with pale yellow siding and dark green shutters. But tonight, it felt like a fortress, and I was the enemy laying siege. A single light was on upstairs, in my parents' bedroom. A faint, golden square in the darkness. Was my father awake, staring at the ceiling, stewing in his anger? Was my mother crying? I pushed the thought away and slipped into the narrow, dark alley that ran behind the properties. The air here was cooler, smelling of damp earth and decomposing leaves. I found a familiar section of fence, the wood grayed and weathered with age. I pressed on the third slat from the end, and it gave way with a quiet, familiar groan, swinging inward just enough for me to squeeze through. And then I was in it. Vovó Alara's garden. The moment I crossed that threshold, the world changed. The sounds of the neighborhood faded, muffled by the dense foliage. The air was thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine, a perfume so sweet and intoxicating it felt like a physical presence. The moon, a pale sliver in the sky, cast a weak, silvery light, painting the world in shades of charcoal and pearl. I could hear the gentle rustle of leaves in the faint breeze, the chirp of a lone cricket hiding under a broad hosta leaf. I stood still for a moment, letting the familiar peace of this place wash over me. This was where I had learned the names of flowers, where I had tasted my first sun-warmed tomato straight from the vine, where Vovó had told me stories of the old country, her voice a soft melody woven with the buzzing of bees. My eyes adjusted to the gloom. I could make out the shapes of the raised vegetable beds, the dark, lumpy forms of the hydrangea bushes, the tall, sentinel-like sunflowers bowing their heavy heads. And there, in the farthest corner, where the moonlight barely reached, was the rose bush. The one that never bloomed. I moved toward it, my feet silent on the soft, mossy path. The garden felt alive around me, watching. Every brush of a leaf against my arm felt like a whisper from the past. I reached the rose bush. It was a tangle of thorny, dark canes, looking stark and barren amidst the lush summer growth around it. Asterisco aos pés da rosa que não desabrocha, asterisco et de fiche off de rose det das noche bloom. I knelt. The earth was cool and damp through the fabric of my jeans. I hesitated, a sudden, superstitious fear gripping me. What if I was wrong? What if this was all a delusion, the desperate fantasy of a heartbroken girl? What if there was nothing here but dirt and worms? I pushed my fingers into the soil. It was soft and crumbly, rich with decades of compost. I dug, my nails filling with dark, fragrant earth. I dug down 3, 4, 5 inches. And then my fingertips brushed against something hard and smooth. Not a rock. Something manufactured. My breath hitched. I scooped away the soil more carefully, my heart hammering against my breastbone. I unearthed a small, metal box, about the size of a thick book. It was old, made of tarnished tin, with a simple, rusty clasp. There was no lock. This was the key? The message said Achave, the key. Was this the key, or did it contain the key? With trembling, muddy fingers, I pried the clasp open. The lid lifted with a squeak of protest. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, were two things. One was a small, ornate, brass key. It looked old, the kind of key that might open a diary or a jewelry box. The other was a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. My name was written on the front in my grandmother's elegant, looping cursive. Sophia. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the moonlight on the page. She had left this for me. Years ago, she had known. She had known there would be a day when I would need a message from her. I wiped my hands frantically on my jeans, suddenly terrified of smudging her words. I carefully broke the wax seal. She had always loved sealing her letters with wax, and unfolded the paper. The writing was faint, the ink a faded brown, but it was unmistakably hers. Asterisco, minha querida Sofia, minha pequena artista, asterisco e te bega. My dear Sophia, my little artist. Asterisk, if you are reading this, it means the garden has called you back, and your heart is troubled. I always knew your spirit was too wild, too beautiful, to be contained by the walls of this house forever. Your father, my Antonio, is a good man, but his heart is a fortress built from fear. He is afraid of losing what he has built, afraid of the world he does not understand. He mistakes control for love. Asterisk. I swallowed a sob, my shoulders shaking. It was as if she were sitting right next to me, her gnarled, gentle hand on my shoulder. Asterisk, the key in this box opens the bottom drawer of my old writing desk, the one in the attic. In that drawer, you will find my journals. They contain many stories, but one story in particular, the truth about our family, is what your father has been running from his entire life. It is a truth about me, and about a man who was not your grandfather. A truth about a love that was forbidden, and a child who was born from it. Your father, Antonio, is that child. Asterisk. The world tilted. The chirping crickets, the scent of jasmine, the cool night air, it all receded, replaced by a roaring silence in my ears. Not my grandfather? My father was illegitimate? I was young, the letter continued, and in love with a man my family would never have accepted. He was an artist, a painter from the north. We had a few precious months together before he was gone, his life taken in an accident. I discovered I was with child after he died. To save the family from shame, my parents arranged a quick marriage to a kind, simple man named Roberto Santos, your grandfather. He agreed to raise Antonio as his own. He was a good man, but it was a marriage of convenience, not love. Antonio never knew. He worshipped Roberto. To tell him would have shattered the foundation of his world. So I buried the truth, and with it, I buried a part of myself. I believe this secret is a poison in our family's blood. It is the root of your father's rigidity, his fear of dreams and art and anything that is not solid and predictable. He is trying to build a monument to a man who is not his real father, and the weight of that lie is crushing him. And now, it is crushing you. Sophia, you have his eyes. My painter's eyes. You have his soul. Do not let them extinguish your light. You must be brave now, my darling. Braver than I ever was. You must find the journal for the year 1972. You must take the truth to your father. It will be a terrible storm. It will break everything. But only after a forest fire can the seeds of new growth find the sun. I love you, my child. Set them free. Set yourself free. Com todo meu amor, vovó Elara. I sat back on my heels, the letter clutched in my hand, the cold, brass key in the other. The pieces of my life, of my father's life, were spinning in the air, rearranging themselves into a picture I had never imagined. My art, my passion, the very thing my father despised, was an inheritance. It was in my blood. It came from the grandfather I never knew, the artist whose name I didn't even know. My father's entire identity was a lie, a carefully constructed fiction built to protect a young woman's reputation 60 years ago. And the weight of that lie had been passed down, a generational curse of control and fear, and it had finally fallen on me. I looked from the key in my hand to the dark, silent house. The attic. The journals were in the attic. To get to them, I would have to break into the house I was forbidden from entering. I would have to sneak through the halls of my childhood like a thief, all to find a truth that had the power to shatter my family into a million pieces. Or, perhaps, to finally make it whole. The message from Elle had been right. They did need me. But not in the way I could have ever guessed. I tucked the letter and the key into the inside pocket of my jacket, the paper crinkling softly against my chest, a secret now held close to my heart. I stood up, my legs steady now, my purpose clear. The garden, once a sanctuary of peace, was now a launching pad for a war of truth. I took a deep breath of the jasmine-scented air, turned from the rose bush that had finally, after all these years, given up its secret, and walked toward the dark, sleeping house. Continua a história. The back door was, as it always had been, unlocked. My father, for all his talk of security and responsibility, had a profound, small-town trust in his neighbors that manifested in this one, simple habit. The knob turned smoothly and silently in my hand, a minor miracle of well-oiled mechanics. I pushed the door open just wide enough to slip inside, into the mudroom. The smell of home hit me like a physical blow, lemon-scented polish, the faint, lingering aroma of this evening's coffee, the unique, dusty scent of our forced air heating system. It was the smell of my life. It was the smell of a world that had, hours ago, disowned me. I stood perfectly still, listening. The house was a symphony of its own quiet sounds. The low hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. The rhythmic, soft tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the living room. The faint creak of a floorboard upstairs as someone, probably my father, shifted in their sleep. Each sound was a landmine in the silence. My socks were silent on the cool, hardwood floor as I moved from the mudroom into the kitchen. A sliver of moonlight cut across the table, illuminating the empty chair where I had sat for my last meal. The memory of the pot roast threatened to rise in my throat, and I pushed it down. I had a mission. The attic entrance was in the hallway on the second floor, right outside my parents' bedroom door. I began the agonizingly slow ascent of the stairs, placing my feet on the very edges of each step, the way Marco and I had learned to do as children when we were trying to sneak downstairs for a midnight snack. The third step from the top, my nemesis, let out its low, mournful groan under my weight. I froze, my heart leaping into my mouth. I listened, my entire body tense, for the sound of a bed spring, a questioning voice. Nothing. Only the relentless ticking of the clock below. I reached the top of the stairs. The hallway was long and dark, a tunnel with a sliver of light spilling from under my parents' door at the far end. My own bedroom door was to my left, closed. It felt like looking at a stranger's room. I moved past it, my shadow a long, distorted giant on the wall. The pull cord for the attic hatch was there, a white, braided rope hanging like a noose in the darkness. I reached for it, my fingers brushing against the dusty fibers. I pulled. The hatch opened with a sound that seemed cataclysmic in the silence, a loud, wooden scrape followed by the rattle of the folding ladder unfolding itself. I winced, holding my breath. This was it. If they were going to wake up, it would be now. From behind my parents' door, I heard a muffled sound. A cough? A word? My blood ran cold. I stood, paralyzed, waiting for the door to open, for the hall light to blaze on, for my father's furious face to appear. But the sound didn't come again. Just the heavy, rhythmic sound of snoring. My father's snore. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I climbed the ladder into the absolute blackness of the attic. The air up here was different, hot, still, and thick with the smell of old wood, mothballs, and forgotten things. I felt along the wall until my fingers found the string for the single, bare light bulb that hung from a rafter. I pulled it. A weak, yellow glow pushed back the darkness, just enough to see by. The attic was a landscape of memory. Towers of cardboard boxes labeled Zmaz decorations and baby clothes. An old rocking horse, its paint chipped, staring at me with one glass eye. My mother's wedding dress, a ghost in a yellowing garment bag. And there, in the corner, under a dusty white sheet, was Vovó Alera's writing desk. It was a beautiful, delicate piece she had brought from Portugal, made of a dark, reddish wood with slender, curved legs. I moved toward it, my feet kicking up little puffs of dust that danced in the dim light. I pulled the sheet away, the fabric whispering secrets as it fell to the floor. The desk was just as I remembered it, its surface scarred with ink stains and the gentle scratches of a lifetime of use. I knelt down, the rough, unfinished floorboards digging into my knees. The brass key felt cold and solid in my hand. I inserted it into the small, almost invisible keyhole on the bottom drawer. It fit perfectly. With a gentle turn, there was a soft, satisfying click. The drawer slid open smoothly. Inside, stacked neatly, were a dozen or so leather-bound journals, each with a year tooled in gold on the spine. My grandmother's life, in her own hand. I ran my fingers over them, feeling the cool, worn leather. I found the one for 1972. It was thinner than the others. I pulled it out, the weight of it feeling immense, and sat back on my heels, the journal resting in my lap. I opened it. The pages were filled with her elegant script, in Portuguese. I flipped through, my eyes scanning the entries. They were about the weather, about my father as a little boy, about recipes, about her loneliness. And then, near the middle of the book, I found it. An entry dated May 12, 1972. Asterisk, today, I told Mama. I am with child. The father is gone, lost to the sea, and my heart is a shipwreck. She did not cry. She did not shout. She just looked at me with a sadness so profound I felt I would drown in it. She said, we will fix this, Filha. But what is there to fix? My love is not a broken chair. My child is not a mistake. But to them, he is. To them, he is a scandal that must be scrubbed away. They have found a man, Roberto Santos. He is a good man, they say. A quiet man from a good family who has agreed to marry me and give the child his name. He knows the situation. He says he does not mind. How can a man not mind raising another man's child? I feel like a parcel being passed from one hand to another. My painter, my beautiful, wild artist, what would you think of this? You gave me this child, a piece of you, a piece of me, and now I must give him another man's name. I must bury you. I must pretend you never existed. For his sake, they say. For his future. But as I agree to this, I feel my own future, the one I dreamed of with you, turn to dust and ashes. Asterisk. Tears streamed down my face, dripping onto the old page, smudging the ink of her sorrow from 60 years ago. I could feel her pain, her desperation. I could feel the weight of the cage she had been forced into. And I understood, with a terrifying clarity, the chain of events that had led to this moment. Her sacrifice, her buried truth, had created my father, a man so terrified of chaos, of scandal, of the unpredictable nature of art and passion, that he had built his entire life as a bulwark against it. And in doing so, he was trying to bury the very same spirit in me. I heard a floorboard creak directly below me. Then another. Someone was awake. My time was up. I quickly tucked the journal into the waistband of my jeans, pulling my jacket down to cover it. I closed the drawer, locked it, and slipped the key back into my pocket. I turned off the light bulb, plunging the attic into utter blackness, and felt my way back to the ladder. As my head descended through the hatch, I looked down the hallway. The sliver of light under my parents' door was gone. But the hallway was not dark. A figure was standing there, silhouetted against the nightlight coming from the bathroom. It was my mother. She was just standing there, in her nightgown, watching me. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. She had seen everything. Our eyes met in the dim light. I expected fear, anger, a shout to wake my father. But her expression was unreadable. It was a mixture of profound sadness, and something else, something that looked like resignation. Or maybe, just maybe, a flicker of hope. She didn't say a word. She simply looked at me for a long, heart-stopping moment, then turned, and silently walked back into her bedroom, closing the door behind her without a sound. I was left hanging from the attic ladder, my heart pounding, the journal a hard, rectangular truth pressed against my skin. My mother knew. And she had let me go. Continuei história. I descended the ladder on shaky legs, my mind reeling from the silent exchange with my mother. Her face, a pale moon in the darkness, her eyes holding a universe of unspoken words, was burned into my vision. She had seen me, a ghost in the night, committing the ultimate trespass, and she had chosen silence. What did it mean? Was it complicity? Was it fear? Or was it, as I desperately hoped, a secret alliance? I folded the ladder back into the ceiling as quietly as I could, the mechanism groaning softly. The house was once again a tomb of quiet sounds, but the quality of the silence had changed. It was now a waiting silence, a held-breath silence. I had to get out. I had the truth, a bomb wrapped in leather, and I couldn't detonate it here, in the dark. It needed light. It needed all of them. I retraced my steps, floating more than walking down the stairs, through the kitchen, and into the mudroom. I paused at the back door, my hand on the knob, and looked back into the heart of the home that had cast me out. It looked the same, but it wasn't. I was different. I held a secret that could either rebuild its foundations or reduce it to rubble. I slipped back out into the garden, the cool night air a shock after the attic's dusty heat. I didn't go far. I went to the old, white-painted wrought iron bench under the big magnolia tree, the bench where Vovó Alara and I had spent countless afternoons. I sat down, the metal cold even through my jeans, and placed the journal on my lap. I couldn't go back to the bus station. I couldn't run. The message, the key, the journal, it was a path laid out for me, and it led right here. I had to face them. But how? How do you walk up to a man who has built his life on a lie and tell him his entire identity is a fiction? The sky began to lighten, shifting from deep indigo to a soft, pearly gray. The birds, first one, then a dozen, then 100, began their morning chorus, a symphony of chirps and whistles that felt both hopeful and terribly sad. The world was waking up, oblivious to the earthquake that was about to hit my small corner of it. The scent of jasmine faded, replaced by the dewy, green smell of dawn. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, the sound of the back door opening and closing jolted me awake. The sun was fully up now, casting long, golden fingers of light through the garden. I sat up straight, my heart in my throat. It was Marco. He was dressed for work in his crisp, blue Santos and Sons shirt, a travel mug of coffee in his hand. He stopped dead when he saw me, his eyes widening in shock and then narrowing in anger. "Sophia? What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, striding toward me. "Dad told you not to come back. Are you insane?" "Marco, wait," I said, standing up. My body was stiff and cold. "You don't understand. I understand that you disobeyed Dad. I understand that you spat on this family and now you've snuck back like a thief." He was towering over me, his face a mask of the same rigid disapproval I'd seen on my father's face. "You need to leave. Now. Before he sees you." "I'm not leaving," I said, and my voice, to my surprise, was steady. "There's something you all need to know. Something about our family." "I don't want to hear it," he snapped. "Your somethings are what caused all this trouble. Your art, your New York, your selfishness. It's not about me." I shot back, the journal feeling like a brand against my skin. "It's about Vovó Alara. It's about Dad. It's about who we really are." "I know who we are," Marco said, his voice low and dangerous. "We are Santos. We are hard work and loyalty. Something you've clearly forgotten." The back door opened again. This time, it was my father. He stood on the steps, still in his robe, his hair disheveled. He looked older in the morning light, the lines on his face deeper. He saw Marco and me, and his expression darkened like a thunderhead. "Marco? What is going on out here?" he demanded. Then his eyes fell on me. A wave of pure, undiluted fury passed over his face. "You." The word was a whip crack. I told you you were not welcome here. Get off my property. Antonio, please." My mother's voice was a soft, pleading sound from behind him. She appeared in the doorway, her face pale and strained. She looked from me to my father, her hands wringing the hem of her robe. "Just listen." "Listen to what?" my father roared, his voice echoing in the quiet garden. The birds fell silent. To more of her lies? To her excuses? She made her choice. "It's not my choice I want to talk about, Papa," I said, taking a step forward. My legs felt like they might buckle, but I held my ground. I pulled the journal from my waistband. It's Vovo Alara's. The sight of the old leather journal gave him pause. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. What is that? It's her journal. From 1972. I looked him directly in the eye. The year you were born. A strange, cold stillness came over him. You have no right, he whispered, the anger in his voice now mixed with something else, something like fear. That is private. You went into the attic? You went through your grandmother's private things? She wanted me to, I said, my voice breaking. She left me a key. She left me a letter. She knew this day would come. She knew you would try to crush my spirit because you were always trying to crush the part of her that you never understood. You know nothing about my mother, he shouted, but the shout had a desperate, ragged edge to it. I know that her favorite flower was the lily of the valley because it was strong enough to bloom in the shade, I said, the words pouring out of me. I know that she put a little cinnamon in her coffee, a secret from her own mother. I know that she loved to sing old Fado songs when she thought no one was listening. And I know that she was in love with a painter before she married Vovo Roberto. The air went out of him. He actually took a step back, as if I had physically pushed him. His face went ashen. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the truth, Papa. The truth she buried to protect you. The truth about who your real father was. The silence that followed was absolute. It was deeper and more profound than any silence I had ever experienced. Marco was staring at me, his mouth slightly agape, all his anger replaced by utter confusion. My mother had her hand over her mouth, her eyes shining with tears. My father just stood there, staring at me, his body rigid. My real father, he repeated, the words sounding foreign and clumsy on his tongue. I opened the journal to the page I had marked. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely read the words. But I did. I read my grandmother's entry from May 12, 1972, aloud. I read her words of love for the artist, her despair at his loss, her heartbreak at the arranged marriage, her feeling of being buried alive. My voice shook, but it didn't break. I read every heartbreaking word, until I got to the final line, asterisk, I feel my own future, the one I dreamed of with you, turned to dust and ashes. Asterisk. When I finished, the journal fell to my side. No one spoke. No one moved. My father was a statue, his face a terrifying blank. He was looking at me, but he wasn't seeing me. He was seeing a different story, the story of his own life, being rewritten before his eyes. Then, very slowly, he sank to his knees on the dew-damp grass. He didn't make a sound. He just knelt there, his shoulders slumped, his head bowed. The great Antonio Santos, the immovable mountain, was brought low by a few words on a page. The only sound was my mother's soft, choked sob from the doorway. Marco finally found his voice. Is this true? He asked, his voice hoarse. I nodded, tears streaming freely down my face now. It's all in here. Her whole story. My father looked up. The anger was gone. The rigidity was gone. All that was left was a shattered, profound confusion. Roberto wasn't my father, he whispered. All my life, I worked. I built the business for him. To make him proud. To be his son. He looked at his own hands, the builder's hands. These hands, they are not his hands? It was then that I understood the true depth of the poison. His entire sense of self, his worth, his purpose, was tied to a man who was not his blood. He had spent his life building a monument to a ghost, trying to earn a place in a lineage that was never his. No, Papa, I said softly, walking toward him and kneeling in the grass before him. I placed the journal in his lap. But they are an artist's hands. They create. They build beautiful things. Just like your real father. The passion you see in me, the thing you were so afraid of, it didn't come from nowhere. It came from him. It came from her. It's in you, too. You just never let it out. He looked from the journal to my face, and for the first time in my life, I saw my father not as a giant, not as an authority, but as a man. A scared, lost, heartbroken man. A single tear traced a path through his stubble and fell onto the worn leather cover of his mother's diary. It was the first tear I had ever seen him shed. The storm had broken. The forest was burned. And now, in the devastating, quiet aftermath, we were all just standing in the ashes, waiting to see if anything could ever grow again. Continua a história. The days that followed were the strangest of my life. We were a family of ghosts, moving through a house that no longer felt familiar. The truth my father had learned was a physical presence, a heavy, silent fourth member in every room. He retreated into himself, spending hours alone in his study, the journal sitting on his desk, sometimes open, sometimes closed, a relic from a past that had betrayed him. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. The fire of his anger had been extinguished, replaced by a deep, bewildered grief. It was more frightening than his fury had ever been. My mother moved around him like a careful wisp, her eyes constantly filled with a worried sorrow. She would bring him tea he didn't drink and food he didn't eat. She tried to talk to him, her voice a soft, pleading murmur, but he would just look at her with a vacant expression, as if he couldn't quite remember who she was. The foundation of their marriage, built on the unspoken agreement to never speak of this, had crumbled. Marco was adrift. His entire worldview, so neatly defined by the Santos name and the family business, had been upended. He was quiet at work, mechanically going through the motions, his usual confident swagger gone. He looked at me differently now, not with anger, but with a kind of wary curiosity. The little sister he thought was just a rebellious dreamer had unearthed a secret that had shaken his world to its core. I stayed. I moved back into my old room, the duffel bag of escape still unpacked in the corner. It felt like a surrender and a victory all at once. I didn't know what to do. I had delivered the truth, as Vovó Alara had asked me to, but the liberation she had promised felt a million miles away. We were not free. We were prisoners of a new, painful reality. On the third day, I found my father in the garden. It was late afternoon, the sun casting long, warm shadows. He was standing in front of the rose bush that never bloomed, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He looked old and tired. "Papa," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. He didn't turn around. "She loved this garden," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "I never understood why she spent so much time out here. I thought it was just a hobby. Now I think it was the only place she could be herself. The only place she could remember him." I came to stand beside him. The thorny canes of the rose bush looked stark in the golden light. "She told me it was waiting for the right time," I said. He was silent for a long moment. "All my life," he began, then stopped, clearing his throat. "All my life, I felt like I had to try harder. To be stronger. To be more of a man than Roberto. He was quiet, you see. Gentle. I thought I had to be loud to make up for it. To prove that I was a true Santos. I built that business not for me, but for him. To show everyone that his son, Antonio Santos, was a success." He shook his head, a bitter, sad gesture. "And all along, I was building it for a man who wasn't even my father." "He was your father in every way that mattered," I said gently. "He chose you. He raised you. He gave you his name. But he wasn't my blood," my father whispered, the words full of a lifetime of unspoken pain. "And my blood was an artist. A man who painted pictures. The very thing he trailed off, unable to say the words. The very thing I despised in you." The unspoken sentence hung between us. I reached out and tentatively put my hand on his arm. He flinched at first, then relaxed, the tension seeping out of his muscles under my touch. "I was so afraid, Sophia," he confessed, his voice cracking. "I saw that passion in you, that need to create, and it terrified me. It was wild. It was unpredictable. It was everything I had been taught to suppress. I thought if I let you follow it, you would end up like him. Lost. A dreamer with nothing to show for it. I thought I was protecting you." "You were protecting yourself, Papa," I said, not unkindly. "From a ghost. From a part of yourself you were too scared to acknowledge." He finally turned to look at me, and his eyes were filled with a raw, vulnerable pain I had never seen before. "I have been such a fool. I drove you away. I said such terrible things. I called you disloyal, when I was the one living a disloyalty to my own mother's memory, to my own heart." A tear escaped and traced a path down his weathered cheek. "Can you ever forgive me?" The question was so simple, so stripped of all his usual pride and bluster, that it undid me. I threw my arms around him, burying my face in the rough fabric of his work shirt. He smelled of sawdust and coffee and the faint, clean scent of his soap. "There's nothing to forgive, Papa," I choked out, my own tears flowing freely now. "I love you. I've always loved you." His arms came around me, hesitant at first, then strong and sure, holding me tightly, as if I were a precious thing he had almost lost forever. We stood there, father and daughter, holding each other in the garden his mother had loved, weeping for the years we had lost to a secret, and for the fragile, hopeful future that was now, finally, possible. That evening, for the first time since the explosion, we ate dinner together as a family. The atmosphere was still heavy, but the weight was different. It was no longer the weight of a lie, but the weight of a shared grief, a shared beginning. My father didn't say much, but he listened. He listened as Marco tentatively talked about new suppliers at the store. He listened as my mother chatted about a phone call from her sister. And he listened as I told him, my voice hesitant at first, then growing stronger, about my portfolio, about Parsons, about the kind of design I wanted to do. He didn't interrupt. He didn't scoff. He just listened, his eyes on my face, really seeing me for the first time. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "This artist," he said, his voice quiet. "You're my father. What was his name?" The question stunned me. In all the tumult, I had never even looked. I had been so focused on the emotional truth, I had neglected the factual one. I don't know, I admitted. Vovo never used his name in the journal entry I read. She just called him my painter. My father was silent for a moment, digesting this. Then he pushed his chair back from the table. Then we should find out, he said. He led us all up to the attic. This time, he turned on the light. He went straight to the writing desk, took the key from his pocket, the key I had given him, and unlocked the bottom drawer. He pulled out all the journals, stacking them carefully on the floor. We all sat in a circle amidst the dust and the memories, my father, my mother, Marco, and I, and we began to read. We read my grandmother's life, page by page, looking for the name of the man who had set all of this in motion. It was my mother who found it. In an earlier journal, from the summer of 1971. Her voice was soft, reverent, as she read the words aloud. Today, Leo showed me the sea. Not the way I have always seen it, as a vast, blue expanse, but as 1,000 different shades of light and movement. He had set up his easel on the cliffs, and he made me sit for an hour, just watching. He said, Alara, you have to see the colors between the colors. And then he painted it. And on the canvas, I saw it. I saw the silver where the light hit the wave, the deep purple in the shadows, the fleck of gold in the foam. His name is Leonardo. Leonardo Moretti. And when he looks at me, I feel like he sees the colors between my colors. Leonardo Moretti. My grandfather. The artist. We had a name. My father sat back, the journal open in his lap. Leonardo, he repeated, testing the name on his tongue. A strange, wistful smile touched his lips. Leo. In that moment, something shifted in the room, in all of us. The ghost had a name. He was no longer a shadow, a secret, a source of shame. He was a man. A man named Leonardo who painted the sea and saw the colors between the colors. And a part of him lived on in my father. And a part of him lived on in me. We were not a broken family. We were a mosaic, pieced together from fragments of different stories, Roberto's quiet loyalty, Alara's hidden passion, Leonardo's artistic soul, Antonio's strength, Isabella's gentle heart, Marco's steadfastness, and my own hopeful dreams. The cracks where the pieces joined would always be there, a testament to our history, but they were what made the picture whole, and uniquely beautiful. My father looked at me across the circle of journals and dust, and his eyes, for the first time in my memory, were full of peace. You should go to New York, Sophia, he said. You should go, and you should paint your pictures. For you. For your Vovo Alara. And for Leonardo. The exile was over. The prohibition was lifted. Not by a decree, but by an understanding, born from a truth that had, as my grandmother promised, finally set us all free. Historia